Once again. Hello, my name is Rob, and I'm from that channel Performance Check, and I thought I'd go live. It has been a little while since I've gone live. I say a little while. I did go live very briefly from AtCon UK, as in, I don't know why I winked. I think most people know there was no AtCon UK. There was my version of AtCon UK, which was going to a festival and pretending that it was AtCon UK. Regardless, I'm glad everyone had a good time. But yeah, that's the last time I went live, and it feels like ages. I've been very busy with a new project, which I kind of need to tell you about to inform you of what subject I'm talking about today. So, I auditioned for this role. I got the part. It was awesome. And it's for a project called Shakespeare Aloud that is happening in Stratford-upon-Avon and will be for a prolonged period of time. It's a very long-lasting job, which is kind of rare in the industry, which is good. And it means that I've been spending an awful lot of time in a place called Stratford-upon-Avon. Now, if you don't know, Stratford-upon-Avon is where Shakespeare was born, and it's where it is the origin of his is the home of the origin of his work, basically. And Stratford-upon-Avon lets you know that at every opportunity, everywhere you look, there is something to do with Shakespeare. The birthplace itself is where I will be operating. That sounds wrong. But it's where sometimes I will be performing. And it absolutely blows my mind walking around. I mean, it really hammers home how important Shakespeare was to storytelling in general, from when he first started. Like, he made such a massive impact in so many different ways, in language and the way that stories are told. So all of this to say is that I've been thinking an awful lot about the impact of individuals throughout history and how you can apply that to your role-playing game. Because I thought about my world, and I was like, well, there are a few key players in there. But if you look to, like, a lot of fantasy works and a lot of actual history as well, there's an awful lot where one person came along and changed everything. Historically, William the Conqueror swept across the Channel, invading England, and taking it and forging a new dynasty, a new control over England, for example. William Shakespeare, with his contribution to language and storytelling, like that, that will never be forgotten. I'm trying to say, the world is not the same once they've made their impact on the world. Can be for bad things as well. Look at Adolf Hitler, look at Stalin. All of this to say, legacy is something that I think can go ignored sometimes when devising a world. I think a lot of time people can focus on factions and locations and cities when building their world, but perhaps, and I'm not saying everyone does this, but perhaps sometimes individuals, can be overlooked. One person can make a good deal of difference. And I'm trying to think of some fantasy examples. And the first one that jumps to my mind, randomly, is Baelor from A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. Religion operated in a particular way in Westeros for thousands of years, and then Baelor comes along and suddenly everything changes. The same with Aegon the Conqueror in Game of Thrones. I'm thinking of Game of Thrones because I'm really excited about it coming back. I'm sure a lot of you watching in this community probably are too. Aegon the Conqueror is, now that I come to think of it, it's probably based off William the Conqueror, sweeping across the narrow sea. One man, well, actually, no, that's unfair because he had two sisters and dragons. But But I got thinking, I was like, the impact that one individual has on a world can define it in a number of ways. And I wanted to see that, you guys in the community, if you have any figures like that in your world, and if not, how do we create them? How do we put those figures into our games? And that's kind of like the conversation that I want to have. So whilst I wait for the chat to populate or whatever, I'm going to tell you a bit more about what I've been doing. So this project that I'm doing, Shakespeare Aloud, it's called Shakespeare Aloud, and it's really challenging, and I'm really, really tired. I'm really tired because basically what Shakespeare Aloud is that it's an interactive show where essentially audience members will approach us and say, I want to hear something from this, and then we do it. I want to hear this sonnet. I want to hear this speech from Macbeth. I want you to do this scene from Romeo and Juliet. I want to see this scene from Hamlet. And we've got to do it. And it's crazy. I went and I watched some people who have already been doing it, who have been doing it since March, and it is absolutely insane that they will be able to just jump into anything they're asked of from the entirety of Shakespeare's works. It is a daunting task, but it is one that I am being trained in because it requires an awful lot of memory space, shall we say. And what I've been doing for the past week is solidly just learning, which has been interesting. But I was only going into that just whilst I wait for people to chat to me. Let's see. I see a few people have joined me today. Jacob Norman, hey man, how's it going? Ian Christensen, hey man, good to see you. And Dan Barnes, Dan my man, how's it going? Looking forward to Monday. Jacob Norman says, I have created a legendary band of adventurers called the Valeros. Valeros. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, man. I know you've spelt it phonetically, but I'm tired. Each of them became powerful and went on to become some sort of, oh no, it's this thing that's happened again. Make your comments short, because when I have it in this view, for some reason, I can't read the rest of it. So Jake, if you could say what these figures did when they became powerful and went on to become some sort of, if you wouldn't mind, comments no longer than 4 lines, I guess. But that actually does sound really interesting, Jake, the idea that there is an actual band of adventurers, because and that actually fits into the logic of with D&D, especially because you always have like a group of people that work together. It isn't one person usually, so these could have been adventurers that your current adventurers aspire to be like. In fact, they could very well be adventurers that have already been played by playable characters. Look at Acquisitions Incorporated, or in fact any game that you've probably run. Like, I'm sure you guys have lots of playable characters that went on to become famous. Provokers as well. The Provokers do it as well. They're pretty famous now as well, aren't they? Tyler Hurst joined. Hey man, how's it going? Dan Barnes says, always, Middle-earth won't save itself. It certainly won't. Guys, if you have not checked it out yet, I urge you to go over to YarDM, that's Lloyd Collins' YouTube channel, and check out the campaign that he runs, Adventures in Middle-earth, called Against the Shadow. Breathtaking GMing from Lloyd. Every fortnight I feel like I step into Middle-earth. Jacob Norman says they each became villains. Wow, well there you go. I like that idea. I like the idea that they stand as a testament as to what can go wrong as well, which good villains often do. Good villains. What are good villains? I think that's a line that Batman says to Superman at one point. Superman says, what happened to all the good villains? And Batman's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean good villains? Like, are you an idiot? There we go. Superheroes are a good example as well. Like, one man, Batman, goes on to become a legend in his city because of his actions, like, Batman has a symbol in the sky that means something to everyone. It means hope to those who need defending and fear to those who would, resort to criminal activity in Gotham City. Jake goes on to say, the cleric is the antagonist in my Tomb of the Mummy Lord adventure. Well, there you go. That's fantastic. I just love the idea of just having legends about and stories about particular individuals in your world, because at the end of the day, your world could be the most amazing thing in the world. You can have the most amazing locales. You can have cities built on mountains. You can have wicked factions, but all of it is empty when you don't have like particular characters that inhabit it and that offer things and offer things to the world and change the world for the better and for the worse. That's how history works, and I love thinking about it. Like, I was thinking, can you imagine if Shakespeare actually was a bard, like from D&D, like that actually had magic? Although if you were really pretentious, you'd say, well, actually, Shakespeare's already magic enough. But yeah, can you imagine, like, if just like an ordinary man who, had a good imagination and just practiced his craft enough, could change language, could change storytelling, could change the way that we communicate between each other, what could someone gifted with magic do? What could a great warrior that rides on the back of a dragon do, It's just great to think about. Tyler Hurst says, in my homebrew world of Providence, Western and Steampunk, that's a good name, man, I like that. A man known as the Flame of Resolve, freed by fellow oppressed slaves by inventing... Again, I'm so sorry, Tyler. Like, this sucks. It really does suck, because you guys have such amazing input. But if the comment is more than 4 lines, I won't be able to read the end of it. I can't. So, the Flame of Resolve was freed by fellow oppressed slaves by inventing something. So, Tyler, let me know what they invented and tell me the rest of the story, because it sounds cool. The Flame of Resolve is a great name. Like, I think that's important as well. When people start getting more names, they have more legendary names being added to the roster of titles that they have. Like, that's always a cool way of showing that they've made an impact. It's a magician's trick to make someone seem more important, but it works. Tyler Hurst also said, hey man, how are you doing, brother? Tyler did actually continue. He says that the Flame of Resolve has become a symbol in the current mini campaign I'm running. See, there you go, like kind of like almost like a, well, I was going to say like a Robin Hood figure. I guess more like a Django figure. Like, that's so cool. He was not freed by fellow oppressed slaves. He freed his fellow oppressed slaves, and he invented the gun and fought back. He invented the gun. That's an amazing thing. Like, that's pretty cool. Like, can you imagine if you had a world where you could actually say, this person invented the sword. I think it works better as a gun, actually, because but that's really cool. I like that idea. So, in a way, the gun is the Flame of Resolve's symbol. That's really cool. I like that an awful lot. And there you go. That's his legacy. So anyone who fights with that particular weapon could indeed be, maintaining his legacy as you live on throughout the world. Or people that blemish the legacy by using the gun for nefarious purposes. It's really interesting. For those of you who just joined, if you also have important figures in your world that have shaped or defined that world in some way, let me know, because I find it fascinating. I mean, like, I can think of more examples, like, let's think of one of our communities. I said the Provokers earlier. They were heroes that obviously, they they have a legacy of their own now because of their actions, and it's shaped the world in a certain way. Even bigger than that, let's look to Dragon Grin, Tim and James Carney's setting. Look at the Dismembered Lord, you know, like the tyrant. He's basically changed the entirety of the world by his rule. All because of one person, you know. And I find that so fascinating because it links it to character. It links it to an individual with motivation. That's where storytelling lies. It's with characters. And I find that is a way more interesting way to develop a world than just, you know, saying, oh, here's a city, it's here for some reason, you know. That's a bad example, but hopefully you know what I mean. Tyler Hurst says, I've got a group called the Peacekeepers, who are sheriffs and sheriffs in training that live the Flames legacy. Yeah, see, that's pretty cool. Like, he's kind of there. I know what you mean. He's kind of the figure that they adhere to. Like, they go by his code of honor. They're his teachings, perhaps. That's really cool. The thing is, I have a few examples in my world. But I didn't particularly want to go into my world because I like a lot of my stuff to be discovered in game, and the players might watch this. I don't know. Suffice to say, the God King in the Nine Kingdoms is one such figure, uniting a world of chaos. To into the Nine Kingdoms and bringing order to the world. Now, whether that's a good thing, whether it's a bad thing, is up for debate. But it's because of his motivations and his actions that the world is like the way it is, and it's because, once again, of an individual's actions and an individual's vision, and that is fascinating. And it also is a good way of telling your players, look, when people do stuff, it matters. And it could be you. It could be anyone. It really could. Anyone can make a difference if they are in the right place at the right time, or if they engineer the right place at the right time. It's interesting. What other ways can people affect the world? We've spoken about with Shakespeare and language. We've spoken about tyrants and heroes. What other ways? I thought the example I gave earlier with Baelor is quite an interesting one from Westeros, from A Song of Ice and Fire, because he changed the way that a religion functioned, which is pretty rad. Now, admittedly, it isn't sweeping an entire nation with an army and conquering the world or whatever, but it is still changing the way that people, you know, regard their faith, which I think is interesting. It's like someone coming along and updating the faith, essentially, is what he did. Like, I'm not like an expert on A Song of Ice and Fire, but I know enough to get by. And as I understand it, he changed the religion, the Light of the Seven or whatever, to be a bit more lenient, I think, than the way that it was. It's basically Old Testament and New Testament, the way I look at it anyway, which is pretty damn rad. What other ways, guys? I want to know. I'm going to have a puff and a sip of tea because I'm rambling on and on and on, as per. I'm trying to think of other examples as well that isn't like a hero or villain, because I think those are the obvious and key ones, really, aren't they? When there's like a great hero or a nefarious villain. Like, what about someone that... like an inventor, like Tyler was saying with the gun. That's a really good one, isn't it? Because when the gun is introduced, sure, it's a feat of engineering, but it also changes the way combat is done throughout the entire world. And all of a sudden, where once it took great warriors to be able to do battle and slay many individuals on the battlefield, you had to like put a lot of training and effort into fighting with a melee weapon. Now you can kill someone by just squeezing a trigger. Now, not to say you don't need to be talented to use a firearm. Obviously, you do. But not nearly as much, point and squeeze. So, an invention it's just made the act of killing so much easier. And because of that, more and more people die. Wars cost more and more lives. Warfare changes. People no longer charge out in the open. They don't line up across the hillside. No, they take cover. And they use whatever resources they can to stay alive and make sure they can put bullets in people before they get bullets put in them. All because someone invented something. Or utilized black powder or whatever. Okay, so inventions. What else? What other kind of inventions with religion and faith? You see, this is I find it super interesting. And there are so many examples. Many an example I can't think of right now. Come on, there must be one more. Like maybe currency. There we go. Someone could have come along and said, "Look, we've been living in a bartering system for God knows how long. Now, admittedly, it might not just be one individual that introduces currency, but there could be an organization that come up with the idea that there needs to be a new way of dealing with trading. Like before, it could just be, I will give you this hammer if you give me some wheat so I can feed my family, blah, blah, blah. Then, eventually, currency comes along. I suppose that's harder to place onto one particular individual, but like I say, an organization perhaps from a kingdom that states that if you have this currency, blah, 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 you can then use it to trade for goods and services, blah, blah, blah. And that's another way, I suppose. So there could be like a great banking clan that initiated this new way of dealing with money. Because of that, trade becomes different, and that alters the way your world works. You go from savage lands to civilization. Art, like I was saying with Shakespeare, is a good one as well, with bards, changing the way people speak, common could then change into a more advanced version of common. So you've got old common. Can you imagine that? I've heard people sort of object to common being used in D&D and stuff. Can you imagine if there was old common and new common, that kind of thing, where your world could be divided with how people speak? And obviously it kind of is anyway, because you have the racial languages like Elven and Dwarvish and Giant, Draconic, Infernal, but those being divided as well. I know I'm kind of just rambling, because I'm trying to think of examples. I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear more. What else do you think, guys? What else do you think could one individual change? Perhaps there would be a king that decided that the world was no longer fit to be ruled by kings, and instead decided that, it should be a republic or something, It does the gladiator thing with Marcus Aurelius saying Rome will no longer be, it will be a republic from this day on, Then he gets horribly murdered. Spoilers for Gladiator. It did come out in 2000, though. I think it was 2002? Not sure. Good film. There you go. That's another one. So from Gladiator, let's take what's his name? My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North. Father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my revenge in this life or the next. So he went from being a famous general to everyone believing that he was killed, to then him becoming a slave, and then from being a slave went on to defy an emperor and show the world that there is a better way to... I guess he kind of rebels, doesn't he? And he kind of delivers the message that, you know, Rome should be free and it shouldn't just be led by one man. It's a good story. It is a good story. Well, there we go. I think those are enough examples anyway. If you do think of any more, though, do let me know in the comments below. I will post this to YouTube like I usually do. What figures throughout the history of your world have defined it? How has your world changed because of the actions of one person? Is it because it was a villain, a tyrant that took over? Is it because of a hero that liberated a land? Is it someone that changed the way that we think about, or the way that people think about trade or religion? I would be interested to hear your thoughts. Are there others, you know? Are there, you know, with art as well, with, like I was saying, with Shakespeare and the works of famous bards throughout the world? I'd like to know if there are any more. There must be more. So I guess that's a challenge I'm setting down. How else can the world be defined by just one person? One woman, one man, one creature, even, you know? Interesting. Interesting to know. I think creatures actually is quite a good one, because you could say the Tarask. The world could have been changed because of one colossal threat by a creature. Although I suppose that's easier, I guess. I'm trying to challenge us, because then you could say, oh yeah, well, dragons then. In that case, dragons change the world. I'm talking more about... Well, I suppose dragons are characters as well. That counts. No. We can say creatures as well. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you've liked this, give it a like. If you'd like to see more like it, then give me a subscribe or not. We are all friends here. Or are we? Take it easy, and I hope that all of your performances are up to standard.